It hasn't really felt like that long, but it's been about a week since I made a video for you guys. Last night we got our very first big dump of snow here in Montana.
What are you doing? Come on. Come on. Come on, Penny. Come on, Penny.
Even though we did get a bunch of snow, the weather is actually really nice. It is hovering right around freezing, the sun is shining, all of the horses seem pretty happy. And I know a lot of you guys have been wanting an update on Pearl because the last video she was not really looking very good. She definitely had a really hard time over New Year's with all the fireworks and excitement going on. I was really worried about her for a few days because it seemed like she was really unhappy, but she thankfully has sprung back to life. The edema on her midline has been significantly reduced and she is continuing to gain weight pretty steadily. Compared to last week, she is also in much better spirits.
Girl. What are you doing?
The only one who's really upset about the weather is Tiny.
Come on. Come on.
She seemed to be really enjoying the nice weather that we were having, but now that there's snow on the ground, her hunting missions are going to be contained to whatever she can find in the barn. Last night we got about 4 to 5 inches of snow. I just got the driveway plowed, so I'm gonna head out and give some of the horses a little bit extra breakfast. This is the perfect Montana winter weather. We've got some freshly fallen snow. The temperature is really perfect out.
Hello, boys. Three.
These horses are very comfortable in their winter coats as long as they have something to eat. Even Pearl, who was very skinny just a few short weeks ago, is a good weight right now, and I haven't been having to put her blanket on. She's actually still been getting a little bit too hot with her thick coat, so hopefully with this cooler weather she'll be a lot more comfortable. It really hasn't been that drastic of a temperature change, but the horses are still drinking water really good. I didn't quite give all of the boys enough hay this morning, so I'm going to go back and give them a few extra snacks.
Boys.
I got a question on a video last week about how many times I feed these horses, and for the most part everybody normally gets fed twice a day. This time of year it's somewhere between 7 and 9 a.m. and then again in the evening between 4 and whenever it gets too dark for me to see. We've been having basically no wind here, which is awesome, so these boys have been getting their feed at night in their hay net, so it lasts a little bit longer.
Hi, Pete. Oh. Hi, Pete.
In the morning, they've just been getting it on the ground. It's really good for them to stretch their top line, and they can kind of kick around the hay and it doesn't get as dusty for them. I'm really grateful the snow finally came because these horses can start looking a little bit cleaner.
Nigel. Hey, Nigel.
After I pop over and check on Nigel, Frisco, and Prim, I am ready to head home for the afternoon. Hopefully today I will get the final results from the rest of Pearl's blood work.
Hey, old boy.
I really hope there is something that shows up that we can actively treat because right now she's kind of plateaued. For the last 2 days, we've continued to get snow every evening, and it is really starting to pile up now. I think total we've gotten about maybe 10 inches. It was really warm last night, so I did decide to put Pearl in the barn, which she absolutely did not like. I know it seems ridiculous, but this girl just runs way too hot to be put inside. As you can see, she is sweaty and she actually has little icicles on her from being inside. I'm 99% sure that she has never been in a stall her entire life, so she got quite nervous. I am also worried about her laying down in there, so moving forward, I think I'm going to have to revamp maybe this smaller arena so she can stay out here with some kind of protection that doesn't really put her at any increased risk with what her health is at right now. It is actually so warm out this morning, I completely forgot to put my coveralls on. But I don't want to get soaking wet in the snow or covered in little alfalfa particles, so I'm going to suit up and get going with the rest of my chores for the day.
Nigel! Nigel! Hey, little buddy. What's up, Nigel? Frisco Bill?
It looks like for the most part Nigel has been enjoying his little tent. He does seem to be dragging quite a bit of snow inside, but we did receive a pretty significant amount over the last couple of days. Even Nigel is too hot for the weather right now, and all of his snow is melting. He seems to be in very good spirits and is pretty excited for his breakfast.
Hi, Nigel. Come in, old boy. Come in.
Thankfully, I have finally heard back about the rest of Pearl's blood work. We were waiting on a pregnancy test just to triple check that she was not carrying a foal, which she is not. We also ran a metabolic panel to check some values that are pretty important for a horse like Pearl. If you guys have been watching for quite a while, you know that this year Nigel was diagnosed with PPID. A lot of people still know it as Cushing's, but it does have some pretty significant implications in Pearl's case. The main value that they test for this disease was 2 times the normal amount for Pearl, so we are going to start treating her. I actually did start treating her a few days ago because I do have the medication on hand. It can be tricky business treating PPID because the medication sometimes is not tolerated well by horses and you kind of have to ease up to the amount that they need. For the last couple of days, Pearl was started on just a quarter tablet in the morning, and then I've bumped it up to a quarter tablet in the morning and at night. You might think that this is terrible news for Pearl, but really it is a good thing that we found out that she has something that is treatable that may improve her current condition even more. Pearl really looked terrible last week. She had a few hard days in a row. When that happens with a horse like Pearl, you really start wondering if it is maybe better to set her free from everything that's troubling her. In Montana and other places where the climate is really tough during the winter, many horse owners have a very realistic talk with their vet whether or not surviving through the winter is a feasible thing to do for an older horse. Pearl is still in active rehab. I do think she still is improving every day. It would be really selfish for me to keep trying to make Pearl better if she just didn't have a chance of improving. Now that we do know she is struggling with PPID, there is a good chance that she'll improve even more once we get the right medication. This is something that would be way more easy if it were summer out. But at this point, I do think it is worth seeing if Pearl will respond to medication before I make any decisions about her future. I have been getting a lot of really good questions about the order that I do the rehab on these starved horses. First and foremost, they do have to make it through the initial refeeding process. Any additional stress through that process can lead to a catastrophic event that the horses cannot recover from. It can be really complicated to deworm, vaccinate, or have a horse's teeth done that is in a starved state.
Whip.
I had a few comments that I waited way too long to deworm Pearl, but most dewormers are chemicals and they can have severe implications on a starved horse. After doing a fecal test and knowing exactly what kind of parasites we were trying to treat, only then could we make the decision to pick out what dewormer would be appropriate for Pearl. In the end, her parasite burden was not significant enough to cause a bunch of problems, so it's fine that I waited a month or however long it was to finally deworm her. A healthy auction horse is a completely different story, so keep that in mind. Senior horses are very tricky to take care of, and it adds another layer of complexity when they haven't been taken care of for a very long time. A lot of the things that you would do normally with a regular horse can have a catastrophic outcome in a starved horse. I feel pretty confident that I've been moving along through Pearl's rehab at a normal pace. It can be a real balancing act when to treat the horse and when to just let them be and start to recover on their own.
Ah.
Right now, Pearl is kind of at a plateau, so it's a really good thing we did some more testing to see exactly what might be causing her unthriftiness.
Gus.
The value that gets tested for PPID can
Buddy?
be elevated with stress, starvation, and a number of other things. The blood work of a horse who is actively starving or going through the refeeding process can be significantly different than a horse that has been refed and is kind of holding steady. I will be interested to see in a month or two if there's any improvement in Pearl's blood work. Compared to where I was mentally last week, I feel a lot better about Pearl's recovery at this point in time. Of course, things can always change, but I feel like right now she is doing well enough that we can just keep on chugging along and see what happens. Scarlet and Ziggy have been spending all day outside since it's been so warm. While this has really improved Scarlet's attitude overall, I think Ziggy has really started to get a little bit annoyed with being turned out with her every day.
Why, Zig?
Every day when I turn him out, he seems to be disgusted that he has to share his pen with Scarlet. She has been trying really hard to be friends with him, but he wants to make sure that she knows he is in charge of their tiny little herd. I also think he is getting a bit jealous of all of the time I spend with Scarlet.
What's wrong, Ziggo?
Compared to Pearl, Ziggy's rehab was super easy. Ziggy was tested for PPID and he doesn't have it. He really just needed some tweaks to his diet and to be muscled up a little bit. He had one tooth that was pulled that seems to be healing up really well. I even had to cut down the amount of mash that he has been getting because I feel like he's getting a little bit too round right now.
Hey there, girlie.
Hopefully in another 6 months or so, I'll be able to say the same thing about this girl. Since Pearl has been doing so well without her blankets, I'll probably wait until it gets around 15 degrees or so at night to start putting it on her. And even then, she really might not need it if she continues to eat the amount of hay that she's been eating. Scarlet and Ziggy have been enjoying their hay in bags out in the small arena. They will stay out here all day so they can stretch their legs and run and play if they want to. Even though the sun isn't shining today, I am sweating underneath my coverall, so it is really warm outside. I have been waiting to try out my new horse vacuum, but with the horses being so wet, I will have to wait until later this evening when they're all dry. With all of the horses happily munching on their breakfast, I'm gonna go and give Pearl a little bit of a once-over. Oops. Pearl did have a little bit of trouble getting up from the ground last week, but it looks like this morning she's already managed to roll.
Roll around? Now you roll around, girl.
I'm kind of surprised how quickly she's drying. She was really warm when I took her out of the stall this morning. It's been about an hour and she looks like she is almost completely dried off. One of the main reasons that I will not put this girl in a stall again is just she's too big for the ones that I have. You can see here on the ground that it is not a normal roll mark from a horse. She kind of squirmed around a little bit while she was getting up. And just with a rough measurement, her little roll mark is about 15 feet by 18 feet. I think she is smart enough not to lay down in her stall, but that is not something that I'm going to bank on with her being so big. With her being well past the quarantine stage, I think I'm going to rig something up in the small arena so she can hang out there. I had another little shed ordered, but it seems to be lost in transit, so I'm going to have to figure something out. One of the other values that we did get back with her blood work was her insulin. A lot of horses that have PPID or Cushing's are also insulin resistant, or they do have equine metabolic syndrome. The two together do present a lot of problems, but it looks like Pearl has just PPID, so that's going to make it a little bit easier for me to find a feed that she'll enjoy eating. Frisco does have equine metabolic syndrome, and Nigel has both PPID and equine metabolic syndrome, so I have to be very careful with the amount of sugar and starch that they get in their feed. Frisco and Nigel do not get any hard feed. They just get beet pulp pellets soaked and alfalfa pellets soaked in their mash. They get all of the vitamins and minerals they need mixed in with their mash. Typically, when I get a new horse in that is recovering from starvation, I will feed them a metabolic friendly feed. When you're refeeding a starved horse, they need to be on a very low sugar diet just so it doesn't trip a metabolic cascade. Pearl has been getting some senior feed just to make it a little bit more enticing for her to eat the beet pulp. She has been getting the same vitamin and mineral concentrate that Frisco and Nigel get. Feeding a horse with PPID does require a very low amount of starch and sugars, but it is not nearly as important for those horses that have both PPID and equine metabolic syndrome. I think that Ziggy might be getting a little bit bored with his current setup. In his previous home, he probably got all winter off to run around in a gigantic pasture with a bunch of other horses, so this is going to be a little bit weird for him.
Yeah, Tiny.
The roads don't seem too bad, and there's this new feed that I've been wanting to try out. I think it will be perfect for Pearl, so I'm going to go grab a couple of bags from the feed store. I also need to fill up the new Turdmobile with some fuel. The last week has been a little bit of a roller coaster for me.
Hey, girl.
I went from really thinking hard about euthanizing Pearl to having a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Hey, girl. Feeling better?
If you did see her video from last week, she was looking pretty pitiful. She really didn't want to eat and didn't want to have too much to do with me. But today, her edema is almost completely gone and she is back to enjoying her belly scratches.
Oh, girl.
I'm not sure if the medication is going to help her with her hair coat just quite yet. Hopefully, when the medication starts working a little bit better, she'll have gained some strength and I'll be able to haul her off property and give her a proper bath. Right now, she is continuing to have some trouble with ringworm and fungus just because she does get pretty hot under this very thick hair coat.
Got some hay in here, girl.
She's been getting less excited about the amount of beet pulp she's been getting, which she really doesn't need anymore. She's been getting enough fiber from her all-you-can-eat alfalfa buffet. So today I'm going to start to slowly move her over from her old feed to the new stuff that I just purchased. It's a few hours before her next meal, but she seems to be more than ready for some more snacks.
Oops. Ziggo.
Since this morning, I do think Ziggy's spirits have lifted a little bit. When it starts getting closer to dinner time and he sees me getting everything ready, he does have a little burst of excitement.
Hey, Ziggo.
My plan was to turn Ziggy and Scarlet out on the little pasture this spring.
Whoa, girl.
However, it has been a really long time since I've seen Scarlet test the fence, so I might be able to turn them out this winter. I typically don't give the horses free rein of the pasture during the winter. There has to be enough snow on the ground so the grass is protected. The fence is a little bit easier for the horses to see in the winter against the freshly fallen white snow. So some turnout time in a much bigger pasture is seemingly on the horizon for these two.
Hey, girl. Zig.
I do think Ziggy is starting to get quite a bit jealous of
Zig.
Scarlet. Anytime she comes over to get scratches, he makes sure he wiggles his way in so she's not stealing all of my attention. He is definitely a horse that's more people-oriented than my other ones. Being so far north, the amount of daylight that we get in the winter is pretty depressing. This month we're going to gain back a whole entire hour, so I'm going to start pushing back the time I feed these guys. I did get 4 bags of this new senior feed to test out on Pearl. It is very similar to the stuff that I had been giving her just as kind of a special little treat. This stuff is extruded, so it's kind of like dog food. It takes a very short amount of time to break down and it basically turns into a mush. The senior feed she was getting was quite high in sugars and starch. It was around 18%. Horses with PPID and equine metabolic syndrome, you really want to have below 10%. I was looking for it on the bag, but these guys don't put it on here. I did check online before I bought it, and it is around 12% sugar and starch, which would be too high if your horse did have PPID and equine metabolic syndrome. But I think for Pearl, this is going to work just fine. I am going to work over the next week or so to get her up to 9 pounds of this per day. Honestly, with the amount of alfalfa she's eating, she could do just fine on that and her vitamin and mineral supplement. But I do want her to have something a little bit more tasty to make sure that she's eating her pills. If she's able to eat 9 pounds of this feed a day, I won't have to supplement her with any other vitamins or minerals. Here is the feed that she was getting. This is also an extruded pellet. It does kind of have a funky smell to it.
Hey, Tiny.
Here is what her current feed looks like. It's just kind of little puffed up pellets. Most senior feeds are going to be texturized feeds, which means they have like little pellets and pieces of beet pulp. While that feed does break down pretty quickly, a horse like Pearl, who needs to conserve every bit of energy she can, would probably benefit from a feed like this that just turns into a mush. Reconditioning a starved horse is extremely tricky, and it seems like this feed would be beneficial to those who really just can't break down their feed or they need to conserve their energy. I just soaked this in warm water for about a minute, and you can see it is almost completely broken down. This is a mixture of the new feed, her old feed, and a little bit of shredded beet pulp. The medication for PPID does come in little blister packs. It is very sensitive to light and can degrade over time, so you just have to be pretty careful when you're handling it. I still have a few little chores to do for the day, but it looks like all of the horses are ready to get their dinner.
Hey, Pearl. Want food? Good girl.
This mare is moving a lot better than she was a few days ago and definitely seems to be interested in getting some extra snacks. I'm really happy with how her body condition is moving along. I will have to be careful when the medication finally does kick in that I'm not overfeeding her, which sounds ridiculous for a horse that was recently starved. But if I'm doing my job right, eventually she will start gaining too much weight. I'm really hoping once this medication starts working that all of her edema will completely disappear. There are a few other things that could be causing it, like the fact that she was pregnant recently and that she was starved, and also the trouble that she may be having with her heart. There are a lot of variables, but finger crossed this medication will help her. A new windbreak and shelter are on my list of things to get done for her. But today I'm just going to finish my regular chores and get all of the horses fed so I can come back again tomorrow and do it all over again. When it's finally time to bring Ziggy and Scarlet in, I start to desensitize them to the new vacuum. Most of them don't mind the noise too much. I don't even have it turned on at this point, but the long snake-like hose does scare some of the horses a lot. I had a feeling that Ziggy would be really scared of this, but I'm excited to see what Scarlet thinks of it. I think Frisco Bill is probably the only horse that I've vacuumed regularly over his life, and he absolutely loves it. I have to think it's kind of like a little massage for these horses, and in the winter it is definitely going to help me keep these guys clean. When I saw Pearl at the auction, I knew there was a very slim chance that she would recover. Today, I'm feeling a little bit more hopeful that she'll be able to live out a normal life in retirement. I've been trying really hard to take you guys along for the ride in an unfiltered kind of fashion, which means showing the bad days along with the good. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.
Zig. What are you doing, girl?